Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brandt, joined with my excellent co-host, James Rhodes, on this Tuesday morning, the day after an extremely disappointing result against Everton. Um, Not the result we expected. Lots to dig deep on. We'll take a look, of course, to Palace at the weekend. But Jamesy, we sit here, we talk. I must confess, this feels like this 5 game bubble where we had optimism was burst last night.
Yeah, this one was ugly because this is one of those games for me where I have to sit and wonder, kind of like Grimsby, when are we going to be
Mm.
past this? Are we ever going to be past this? You know, these performances where you look at it and you go from kickoff, just a distinct, to me, lack of professionalism from the players that are on the pitch, from everybody involved, really. I look at it and I go, some of the things that were going on were just absolutely inexcusable. I mean, you're facing an Everton team in there, and I said this last night, where one of their players slaps the other player in the face and gets sent off, and they display more professionalism, more effort, and more team unity in that, with that happening, than you're able to put out with an extra player. It was unbelievable to me. It's one of those where you go, like, no matter what we talk about in terms of player quality, in terms of this, we can talk about tactics, we can talk about players, we can talk about all of that. I don't care who's there, what they're doing, who's coaching, who's set up, what the formation is,
Mhm.
who's on the pitch. What we saw will undermine any of it at any point in time. When are we moving? How does it happen? How does it happen? And why is it? I don't know. I don't have it leaves me just baffled, like that
Yeah,
that can still happen after all this time.
we can't even talk about tactics. We can't even talk about systems or anything if you weren't willing to bring the bare minimum, the basics.
Hmm.
If you weren't willing to match the intensity and commitment of your opponent, forget about it. I think it was a general pattern that said a bad battle plan executed with gusto is better than a good battle plan that is executed with a malaise.
Hmm.
If and you know, James, I'm not exactly Amarim's biggest defender, right? I praised him where I
That's why I
feel
like
like,
having this conversation with you,
yeah,
because you've been highly critical, and I'm,
yeah, and I've praised him where I felt he deserved praise, and I've criticized where I felt he deserved criticism. But first of all, let me clear something up. It's not a manager's job to motivate you. Now,
correct.
you can inspire someone, you can influence them, but these footballers will play for many managers over their careers. If they're completely dependent upon someone else
Mm,
motivating them to the point where they need to compete, why does a manager need to convince you that you should go out there and give 110% to win the game of
yeah,
football? You're at Manchester United. This is an elite level football club. Motivation, discipline is intrinsic. It's an inside job. No one can do that for you. The biggest reason why players don't make it at the highest level is because they don't have the ability to be consistent in their lives, not talent. So
yeah.
this is something you have to bring to the table. Ruben Amorim, I looked at United. I was talking to my son yesterday when I was watching that game, and I said, I don't like how United have started this game. This looks a lot like the
Hmm.
United that I saw before we saw the improvement. All
Yep.
the old bad habits have creeped in, and we've seen that performance, James, a million times pre-Amorim. Right,
Yeah.
that's a Manchester United performance that we saw. I remember when United played Copenhagen at home at Old Trafford in the Champions League, a game they needed to win, and how pedestrian they were. There was
Mm,
the only reason why Everton won that game yesterday is because they wanted to win it more.
yep.
And yes, there's lots of things you can criticize Amorim for yesterday
For
that
sure.
I believe is fair game, but you can't criticize Amorim for professional intensity. That comes from your players.
Yep.
And if the only thing separating you from beating Everton, 10-man Everton, is a good manager, Then those players are frauds. Do they go to the international teams and not play? And are not motivated because maybe they don't like that manager. And who motivates Amorim? So who should we go after that guy? Or do we
Yeah.
expect Ruben Amorim to be self-motivated, self-disciplined? Of course. So to me, start with the players, because I don't care what system United played last night. They weren't winning that game with that intensity.
For sure, absolutely. It in a lot of instances you can look at it and say, a lot of football games come down to positions and what happens when players are in a one-on-one against someone else. That duel, that second ball, that tackle, that play, that pass, that dribble. Do they beat the opposition? Are they more intense than them? Do they fight them? Do they win that kind of battle? Job of tactics and things like that is very often try to put yourselves in an advantageous position where better players can win a lot of their battles and things like that, where a good players against the player they should have an advantage over. United lost all of them. All of them. From minute one, you could see it. The passes were worse than the passes Everton were making. The zip on them was poor. The direction was poor. The tackles were poor. The intensity was poor. When that happens, you just look at it and you go, it was like Grimsby. It was a League Two side.
Mhm.
They got outworked. They got outfought. They lost their battles everywhere on the pitch against the League Two side. There's nothing that you can do to win a game in terms of setting it up when that is happening. There's nothing that's going to change that. You still have to win battles all over the pitch. Everton score their goal down a man, 2-5.
Yes.
That's not a problem with setting up to defend that goal. That goal happens because that player beats 3 players individually and scores a goal. United had plenty of opportunities up a man where players are in positions where they have to beat one guy. Then they don't do it. And they didn't do it all night. And when that happens, there's practically nothing you can do. And that's one of those games where it's like, yeah, you start
Well,
there and you go, it's just
the
it's
way they
just
started the
frustrating.
game, the way they
Yeah.
started the game, it felt like you know someone with their New Year's resolution. First 4 weeks they're amazing at the gym, and then boom, revert back to type, where you can't trust that there's meaningful substantive change, where that performance is no longer possible.
Yeah.
You have to get that out of your identity. You have to make sure that that performance would not be possible if you're Arsenal or other teams, because their floor, their curve is much flatter.
Mm.
That can't be possible. And
Right.
you look at that game, Everton after 10 minutes lose their right back, James Coleman. Then they get a player sent off. And in many ways, James, the sending off made United even more lethargic and
Yeah.
pedestrian, because you could see they were like, oh, this is going to be easy. We're going to have the socks down, rolling, knocking wee balls about. And it's the same boring shit. Switch play left or right, down the wing, hope somebody gets across in. And you're left in the hope that Ahmad can create something out of nothing. Bruno Fernandes can hit a wonder strike, or they make a mistake, because you're not getting anything as an emergent property of their play that
Yeah.
can only happen as a result of the chemistry you get from playing together. That you can see something that, as I've said before, particularly nascent from the setup. Um, so to me, I'm not here to defend Ruben Amorim, James. I'm just saying that there's blame. Significant blame lies with players. Now, Amorim said some things after that game which were concerning to me. One, he's afraid to go back to the atmosphere that we had, pre Sunderland, was it, or Burnley?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't think he should be saying that, right? Because I think that I would like to believe that the progress United have made has been, substantial and
Mm.
real, and therefore they can't go back to that. If United can go back to that, then I have to retract what I said last week, that there's been meaningful improvement that's obvious, because I would say then I'm wrong,
Yeah.
because meaningful improvement means you can't go back to that. Um, and then when I look at what he did, James, there's certain moments that stand out in United's recent history, contemporary history, and the Watford game, the Besiktas game, right? These
Yeah.
other. I think this is going to be a moment where we're never going to forget the time that Ruben Amorim played three at the back against a 10-man Everton with one player up front. If you want to negate your man advantage, that's how you do it.
But what was the answer? Because, I don't disagree with that as well. But I look at, at halftime, he brought on his only attacking substitute on the bench, which was Mason Mount.
Well, it's Shea Lacey too.
Or what's that?
It's Shea Lacey on the bench too.
I hear that. And I look at that and I go, all right, I mean, maybe that's an option, but are we saying we're sure that he's ready, that he should put him on whether he's ready
Well,
or
I mean,
not? You know what I mean?
if
I
he's
guess
not
what I'm
ready,
saying is you're talking
shouldn't be on
about
the
saying
bench.
that, well, that's fair. That's fair. I guess I'm still looking at that and saying, we're asking for, we've been in this position so many times. Pep Guardiola is never being asked to substitute a player for his debut ever in a
Oh,
team to
100%
play
there, yeah.
against 10 men. Arteta's not being asked to substitute a player who's playing his debut against 10 men, as the only solution to an attack, to solve the
Yeah,
game,
but
to
sure.
fix it. You know
That's
what
a
I mean?
different
Like,
point, though, is it not? Like,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're not expecting Amorim to be 6 points ahead of the league,
Yeah.
like Arteta is, and I completely agree with you. But
Yeah.
surely, how do you know if a young player's ready?
Mm.
You really don't know, right? I mean, there's certain
Yeah.
markers and
Yeah.
indicators, but I think about Makeda against Villa. I think about so many times where United threw on a young player. I think if he had thrown on Shea Lacey, the one player that wouldn't have been criticised at the end of the game would have been him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you have an opportunity. Like, I don't know. I think to me, given how toothless United were up front, I would have done. I think that if Ruben Amorim wanted to change the narrative at the end of that game yesterday, one of the ways to do it was putting in Shea Lacey. If Shea Lacey came in, had a decent 25 minutes, didn't score, a lot of our conversation today would be about Amorim's bravery and Shea Lacey.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think what you're saying is fair. Yeah.
Do you feel he'd rather lose with his system than win and change it?
I mean, I think that to a degree, a part of it is we went up a man and still conceded with how poor they were defending, and I think that was probably a big part of the concern in taking off more defenders. Because he took off another player there, he took off Casemiro for Mainu, so you end up in a position where you had. I get the three center backs thing,
No threat, James.
but at the end of it, it was still only four defenders on the pitch, which is not, because the midfield, you took out your number six. You have a winger at one side, so you have Dallo and three center backs. I mean, that's not particularly different in my eyes than how most teams will play. It's fewer defenders than you'd usually play in a normal game, because usually you've got a defensive midfielder and you've got a back four, and then you've at least got five. So I feel even still there were seven forwards on attacking midfielders or forwards on the pitch at that point in time, enough to do it, enough to get somewhere. Now, look, I hear that point in that respect of like either what, you could take off, De Ligt or Shaw or Euro or something and put on, an attacker, someone like Shea Lacey to come on and try and do, something and play with a back two against it. But I mean, yeah, look, I don't disagree with that. I look at it and I go, they conceded though 5-on-2 against Everton at the 28th minute with those defenders.
Yeah,
They couldn't handle Everton's forwards even with those defenders, and now we're saying let's take another one
but James,
off. I mean, you're not wrong though. I mean, I
yeah,
get that.
to me, given the way United conceded, it wasn't a question of numbers; it was a question of intensity.
Yeah.
And trying to protect the 1-0 defeat doesn't make sense to me, right? I'm looking at the left side of United's play, and I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
Because you've got these overloads on the left hand side. You've got young Patrick Dorgu who just will not take on the fullback and put a cross in. He
Mhm.
stops, checks, plays the ball back. I mean, I want to be kind to the young lad because I don't want
Mhm.
to put the boot in, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
fair. But
Yeah.
James, what are we doing here? Like it is so blatantly obvious that this kid is not at the level you need. And it is such an issue attacking because he kills the momentum in the attack. He constantly passes the ball backwards. I don't know why he
Mhm.
refuses to cross the ball first time. I don't know why he refuses to take on the fullback. He had a decent chance in the first half, and there wasn't a single moment when that ball
Yeah.
came across that I felt that ball was going in the net. Right? What happened is what I expected. That is a big problem. United,
Mhm.
they're creating overloads on the left with Luke Shaw 5 yards from Dorgu. Why? What are Luke Shaw's doing what Dorgu should be doing, putting the ball. And I'm not saying Luke Shaw, escapes blame either, right? But
Yeah.
you you know we don't have a left back that can beat a player and put the ball across the bar. I just don't
Yeah.
understand. I watch football every weekend. I look at other clubs' left backs flying down the wing, putting balls in, being dangerous. And this kid, I mean, he doesn't even look. I want to be maybe I don't want to go overboard, right?
Yeah.
He just doesn't look ready. James, now that's a player that to me,
Yeah.
if he was at City, if he was at Arsenal, what have you, or Liverpool, he'd be replaced already. That you know, Patrick Dorgu is not at the quality United need on the left. Now, there's other issues. They
Yep.
mean losing a striker. Xerxes was the sixth deepest player in United's team last night. Right now, that just
Mhm.
can't happen, James.
Yeah.
Xerxes doesn't have the instinct of a striker to me, and United just aren't good enough. I revert back to your point. Once you two or three players out of United, it's a pretty average team.
Yeah. Well, if you look at yesterday's team, you have one different outfield player than the team that finished 15th. That's the
Mm.
truth. That's it. So we can't be totally surprised that it's looks similar to what we saw last season. Mbumo's the only player and didn't have his best game, but he's had a lot of good games. He was the only player that was different to last year's team on the pitch last night. That was it. Besides Lamens and goal. And you're against 10 men. So Lamens was frankly inconsequential for 90% of that game.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying, James. Right. So when 1-0, Everton have a low block. When you're defending, you're constantly reacting to what the attacking team does. That's all you're
Yeah.
doing. So the attacking team should have the advantage. You need to seize the initiative and make them play your game. There's no reason. I saw so many times last night where United would pick up the ball and there's 6, 7 players behind the ball. Why?
Yeah.
If you don't trust your team to not concede again against a 10-man Everton, I have concerns. Ruben Amorim is a year into this job, and we all remember, I think it was after the Ipswich game, where he said, if we don't change now, a year from now, we're going to be in exactly the same position, right? Well, you could
Yeah.
argue we're in a worse position, or maybe you could argue we're in a better position. I don't know. But I don't think anyone expected a year from then we'd be here. And I only need scraps off Amorim to get behind him. Like I want him to be successful. I don't care who the manager is. I want him to be
Mm,
successful. But last night was very concerning, James, because
yeah.
there's a lot of blame to go around. Players too deserve responsibility. But what have we gained over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't disagree with that at all, and I'm concerned, and and I think that my argument for the most part is not at all actually that I'm certain Amarim's going to be successful or something like that. I just look at it and I go, I think we're doing the right things in terms of building the team, getting in the players, the players we got this summer, I
Mhm.
think have ultimately been successful. I think
Yep.
you see last night a huge example of just how much we miss them when they're not there, how
Mhm.
bad the fall off is from Sheshko down. How bad the fall off is. We miss, Cunha hasn't scored a ton of goals, but I think last night we saw as well again what we miss
You
when
miss
he's
his
not on
leadership.
the
Yeah.
pitch. His leadership, his intensity, his aggression,
Mhm.
These things are massively lacking when players like that are not on the pitch, massively lacking. And so I look at it and I go, to me, it's like job's not finished. My biggest concern with clamor to change the managers and things like that at this point in time is like, if you sack Emerim today, 3 points off of top four, forget whether, it's the league is
Or
pretty,
Ten Hag was.
yeah. If you sack him today, right, after everything that's happened, what do you tell the next manager? You're saying, once again, short-term results are the priority. You don't get results immediately, we're going to fall off. And you're saying we don't need to keep rebuilding the team. He has a goal, which is to get into Europe this year. I strongly believe that should we not see a marked improvement as we go on through the season, not to say there won't be ups and downs, but we did just come off a 5-game stretch. Now we've had a really bad game, right? A really bad game in there, right? 3 wins, 2 draws, now a really bad game.
Mm-hmm.
It's how the next 5 go
Yeah.
after this that matter a lot. We need to see improvement in these games, because progress is going to be like this and it's going to have its dips. Do you get back up after the dips? Do they go back up
Mhm.
towards the right direction? Do you go over the next 5 games and win more? If Amorim doesn't get Europe, he's not. We talked about his contract in the last podcast. If Amorim doesn't get us into a European position like the goal was to get, he won't be here. And so in that respect, I'm like, cool, we'll see it out. We know that there's a lot more to do in terms of turning over the squad, because, like I said, one player last night in that outfield 10 different to last season. So it's like we can't be totally shocked. We put the same team, same players, same ideas out, and we get similar results to what we've seen before. There's a lot that needs to change still. Will we be better when Šeško and Cunha are in? Yeah, of course. Better players when they come back, we will be better. When, more players arrive and we add midfield players to the team, when we add players with intensity, when we add players who have the legs and the energy to compete, I think it'll help. I have a massive concern over this thing. We spoke about like Casemiro and Bruno in the last one. I was saying, I know there's, this talk of Casemiro's revival and these kinds of things. I'm still pretty insistent that every time you watch him in a Premier League against a Premier League side, he cannot keep up. And it's not a reflection on his quality as a player or his career or anything like that. He can't keep up with these guys. He
Well, he's
got
a
run
60-minute
around
player.
by them.
He's a 60-minute player. He gets taken
Yeah.
off with a booking every week, right?
Yes. And he's one booking from a suspension, by the way.
Yeah. Which, by the way, James, last night, if Tarkowski doesn't get booked,
Yeah, I don't know
right,
how Tarkowski doesn't get
how
booked.
did he not get booked for that stamp? Like, what were you? What was he trying to do here?
Yeah.
Like it's
Agreed.
that is the most obvious yellow card you'll ever see in your life. But so Casemiro, I think, was unfairly booked if we're using the Tarkowski standard. But we're sitting here talking about things like not having legs. Now, we discussed this last week, not having intensity and desire. How is this possible at Manchester United? This is something that if you're asking me as an outside company to evaluate a business and I see unmotivated employees, I'm going to that business and saying there's something fundamentally wrong with your business where employees are not motivated to achieve certain goals. That to me, there has to be a consequence to that. You cannot survive at Manchester United by being unmotivated. It's okay if human beings are complex, James, right? Things happen. But this is a persistent problem at United. Why is it that, I mean, you've just come back from, international break. Liverpool have lost. City have lost, right? You're going into a game against Everton. You couldn't possibly have asked for, a greater gift with down to 10 men, and you can't get yourself up to win a game. I don't understand that. And, I look at that and I go, same with the Grimsby thing. This is, to me, the least culpable Amorim has been, because if you can't get if you can't get yourself professionally motivated to beat the likes of Grimsby, that's not Amorim's fault. I said this last night, James. If I've got a boxer and I'm in the corner and I set up a game plan, fight, and that boxer goes out there and doesn't give 100%, my game plan isn't going to matter. And he gets knocked out. Is it the corner man's fault? No,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
the athlete. You have to bring these intangibles to the game, and then those other things make a difference.
Yeah. I agree with that. I agree. And it is amazing that those things are still missing. And I mean, it's like when we were talking about Grimsby, I was like, I feel a little hopeless because I was like, what's the answer? And I said, I don't know. Maybe the answer is we just keep going until the whole squad's turned over and there's nothing remaining from before, from this fishbowl we've talked about in the past. And it's like, I
But it
don't know,
repeats
man.
with different players, James. This is the concern. You know,
Yeah.
I'm worried about when Ahmad goes, when Mbumo goes. Like,
Because Ahmad, despite, was still one of our most, I thought he was trying
yeah, he's the
more
only.
than a lot of
Yeah,
others in that half. He didn't have his best game, but I still felt he was one of the few players that in the first half he was trying to do something and make something out of nothing, where I didn't see with a lot of others. Like I didn't see the level drop off from Ahmad where I was like, did you decide to play or not today? Like you're talking about the intangibles and focus. I thought Ahmad put that in. I think he does more than most. And I think I did, again, him and Mboum, I don't think had their best games, but I thought they both showed that. I'm really worried when they're gone because, like we were saying, we see when Cunha's out, the aggression we lose when he's not there is huge. Mentality wise, it's going to be. I'm very, very worried
so
mentally. This team without Ahmad and Mbumo, very,
is
very
that
worried.
not another reason why you play Shea Lacey last night and give him some time? Because
Maybe
look,
you're right.
in
Maybe you're right.
Xerxes' defense, James, he's hardly kicked the ball all season.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not expecting that guy to stew up and play like he's been playing with match rhythm
true,
and fitness and
true.
sharpness. This is what you should expect from a player that's barely played. So now when Mbumo goes, Namad goes, we're going to throw in an 18-year-old because this, Gamarim said, this is what the academy is for. Okay, then
Yeah,
to me, I think it's unfair. What are we going to do when Mbumo and Ahmad goes, two of the United's most important players, and then you're going to throw in a kid? Because what else are we going to do? Like that's
yeah,
really, really concerning. And to me, this is where I sometimes, if you're someone that understands Manchester United in a much more
mm,
granular way,
yep,
maybe you understand the history and you understand the nuance of the media and the fans. To me, a manager brings on Shea Lacey last night because in my head, I'm going, look, couple of things here. One, if this kid comes on and plays well and scores, even if we draw, the whole discussion is going to be about him. If this kid comes on and plays well and we
mm,
lose, we leave this game with a huge positive. If he comes on and doesn't play well, he'll be the one player that no one criticizes. But at
sure,
least I can turn around at the end of this and say, I understand Manchester United. This is what we do. We play young players, but to not play them at all, I'm looking at that going, I don't understand that. Like, you know, you're bringing on Dallo, James.
yeah,
I'm losing the game 1-0. I don't want to see Diogo Dallo come on the pitch, right?
yep,
I want to see an attacking player come on the pitch that forces Everton to respond to that and sit even deeper. But if United didn't have much of a threat either, so Everton were
mm,
easily defending. I just don't understand that mentality, and to me, that's Pep Guardiola has a bit of that at City, where he doesn't really
yeah.
want to play young players. But Everton had more United Academy players on the pitch than United did. I'm not saying Amorim has to do that, but that was a big problem last night.
Yeah, I respect that. I respect that view of it. I can see that. I can understand it. It's like, I look at it from a pragmatic sense, and I think maybe it wouldn't make much of a difference, but I
Yeah,
can definitely agree from the standpoint of like a mentality, a philosophical. And I'm not saying that to be like insulting to the opinion of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying I
sure.
actually I get that. Like maybe it sends a better message to do that, and to
Mm.
say, look, maybe it just does. You know what I mean? Maybe it just does. And so
Better
maybe it's
message,
the right thing to do.
better message to Shea Lacey or what? I'm
To
starting
Shea
to.
Lacey, to the fans, to maybe to the senior players. Like, look what I got to bring
Mm,
in a kid for his debut because you're not getting the job done, and I don't have any other choices. Maybe to everybody. Maybe it just says, I don't know, whatever it says. I can see, like, what you're talking about there of like. I can see that point, I guess is what I'm saying. One way or another, I can see that point. And I've gone back and forth on it because, like I
Mhm.
said, I take a pragmatic view of like, would it have changed the outcome of the game? I don't think so, but maybe you've got a point, and I can accept that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm right. Maybe there's a good reason why he didn't play.
Yeah,
Amarim knows more about football than me, but it just seems to me like that's where you gamble. There's a clip going around
sure.
of Ferguson talking about when you're losing 1-0 and taking risks and pushing players forward, taking
Mm,
off defenders and throwing on attackers. Look, that doesn't always work, right?
yeah,
I don't know what the statistical odds are, but to me, given if I'm holding on to a lead at 1-0 at United, what makes me nervous is seeing more attacking players come on the pitch. Attacking players know how to score goals.
sure, sure.
And I don't not defenders. So anyway, this is another issue for Amorim where I do actually empathize with him because United are at the early stages, James, of
Yep.
a complete squad rebuild, and they just don't have the depth. The
Yep.
Premier League outside of one or two teams is very, competitively balanced.
Yep.
All it takes is a 5% drop off to lose, as we saw with City, we see with Liverpool. It doesn't take much, right? Because in the past, individual players, world class players, stood out and were obvious. If
Yep.
you had 100 million 10 years ago, you wouldn't struggle to find a top striker. You had 100 million today. Who would you buy? What top
Yeah.
strikers out there? You know,
Yep.
with even midfielders, James, the world class bracket was obvious, and then you had you very good, and the rest of it, they're just not that obvious anymore. And
Yeah.
so this is why Guardiola's struggling too. It's hard to go to the market saying an obvious world class player that's better than everybody else that will immediately improve you. And it's so, and in Amarim's defense, he beyond the starting 11, maybe 11 or 12, the quality drop off, and not just the quality drop off, but the type of player that he's bringing in is so different to the type of player that starts. And that's definitely something United need to improve on.
Yeah, I mean, correct. It's not just about quality, but continuity, right? We've said in many times in the past, there's, you're unable to take a player off and say, all right, I want to do the same thing. X player is not
Mhm.
performing. I just want a better player today to perform at that position. We don't have it. Every time you change a player, you change a lot more than the player. You're changing, your whole idea has to change because and that's one of the things I can't totally get on board with. Some people will say, well, we're never changing. We just change the players. The idea doesn't change, but it changes every time you change the player that's on the pitch. What happens ends up changing. And because we don't have that continuity, it's actually one of the opposite points to me, like you say, of being able to do that. Yeah, it's definitely a problem. Like you were talking about how we don't have anybody on the left side that can go and put a cross in. I don't know who we could sub to do that.
Yeah.
We're not gonna get that. If Dorgu's not doing it, you put Dallo on. Now he's right-footed. He's got to do something totally different. He's not going to put crosses in. He's terrified of putting crosses in as well. Even on his right foot, he won't put a cross in. So it's like, I don't.
Well, to
What's
me,
the solution? Shaw ends up over there, puts a couple decent crosses
yeah.
in.
Well, that's what I
And
would have
that's
done,
about
James.
it.
I
Yeah,
would have stuck Shaw on the left and put Martinez
yeah,
in
yeah.
Shaw's
That's fair.
position, brought him in. Perfect game for Martinez to get game 10 because he's not being put under enormous threat. And because
That probably would have been my attacking sub, by the way, in agreement with what you're saying there. Like, I probably would have put Lissandro on as an almost like, because and moved
because
Shaw
he
out to
steps
be
out.
an to be a more attacking player. Like, even aside from Shea Lacey, that is probably, again, if Lissandro is actually fit enough to play. I mean, I'm not 100% certain that he's actually fit enough to play without risk, and that it wasn't just about having him on the bench and when we have the space to put him on the bench for that game. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I think that even logically makes a lot of sense to me, that would have been like an attacking form of substitution.
If you're not fit enough to play, there's a seat for you, but it's behind the bench. It's in the
Yeah.
stadium,
Yeah.
right? If you're on the bench, and you're not an actual live option, what are you doing at the biggest football club in the world, putting people on the bench just to fill it out?
Yeah. That's
Like
fair.
that to me, So I mean, we're talking about Xerxes here, teams, and one of the things that I'd said, this is a key 6 weeks for him, where
Yeah.
he has to get into the team and he has to make, a substantive contribution, or else both him and United need to sit in January and go, it's time for me to. He has a World Cup to think about. I know what Amarim says. I don't see the point of United holding on to a player that really isn't going. I mean, he hasn't scored a goal or an assist in a year. That's not
Yep.
entirely his fault because he doesn't play all the time. But you can't have a striker with those numbers, James. Right? Either you contribute or you move on.
Yep.
But we have to have a conversation about Mason Mount, James. Right? Because when do you want to see Mason Mount in a game? I don't want to see him in a game when United have no forward. I don't feel
fair.
reflecting. Like, when do I want? When am I confident Mason Mount's going to make a difference in a game? Almost never. What a manager's dream, managers like him. But if his name wasn't Mason Mount, let's say it was someone else, and we were judging him on his performances in
What
the
he's
last
done, yeah.
few years.
Yeah.
What are we talking here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Mason Mount has helped us in games in terms of getting control. If I was to have one change to like the starting 11, I would have started him and put Ahmad out wide, just given the options that we had instead of moving Ahmad up to there. But yeah, I mean, it's another thing where look, it's tough because I look at it and I go, there's still a lot of players I look at and I go, well, as much as I want to jump on a manager for making mistakes, which I think he's made in this, I still look at him and I go, what do you do here? Kabi Mainu played 40 minutes. I don't remember anything he did the whole 40 minutes.
It's the same as
Mason Mount played a
he's
whole
never
half.
played.
I don't remember anything he did. And Mason Mount's played a lot more than those two for what it's worth. So I look at Mason Mount and I'm like, you want to do something with this game. You know what I mean? Like, where were you? Because there's a lot of players, and I'm not picking on Mainu, by the way, because I agree with you on Xerxes, like different situation, not playing a lot. They come in, it's harder to make an impact. Mount's been playing a fair bit this season. He's had a lot of starts, but there's so many players in that game. I don't remember anything they did of consequence the entire game. I remember Ahmad trying a lot to do things to beat a man, even if Jack Grealish was defending him very well, which he was. But I don't remember a lot from a lot of these players doing anything the whole game. Like, I can't remember a single moment that Mason Mount played in that game. And I feel that has happened quite a few times, even though I think he's been better this year.
James, this is the point. At 1-0 down with 10 men, a good team wins that game against Everton.
Yes,
right?
of course.
I mean, there's no way Arsenal lose that game. There's no way. I mean, City would lose that game, and then City are nowhere near the levels they were. They would have found a way to win that game because they'd have had players that would have grabbed that game by the scruff and made something happen. I felt that Bruno Fernandes Bruno Fernandes is reduced to hitting shots from 25, 30 yards, right? Because there's nothing in front of him. I'm watching Big Xerxes last night and how static his movement is. I mean, Bruno Fernandes is lifting his head. United's midfield is lifting his head. And you've got the big lad standing there, like a scarecrow. And you're forced to go wide. There's no movement in behind. There's no dragging defenders out. There's just nothing there. And you're reduced to pinging balls over the top, hoping the midfield can run on to deep runners can attack that space. And Bumo doesn't have a good game because Everton have just got a low block sitting deep. There's no space in behind. Everything's in front, right? He had one half decent chance that was saved, but United have to have the ability to change that game with the low block. You have to have the ability to break that defense down. I mean, it was how many shots did they have on target? I didn't by the end of the first half. I think
United.
Yeah.
They had a couple.
Zero.
I think they had a couple because
Well, Fernandes had one, didn't he? No, because I remember seeing a stat on. I saw this anyway. It was really
it wasn't enough. Let's put it that way.
Had one shot on target. Everton had one shot on target, which, by the way, I think Lamans could have done better with.
Yep.
Right. but okay, it's not a hang in the fence to
There
make.
was 2 shots on target in the first half for what it's worth for United, and 4 in the second half, I think.
Does that include? I think does that include the slap?
All I know is it says Pickford made 2 saves in the first half.
Well, but
I'm trying to
fair
find a
enough.
shot on target one, but yeah. No, yeah, 2 shots on target first
Right.
half.
So,
Second half, 4. They took 25 as a total in the game, by the way, to get 6 shots on target, which is pretty bad as well.
yeah. Well, look, it was a terrible performance.
Yep.
That is something that we'll see about what happens against Palace this weekend. It should provoke a reaction, embarrassment, but James, it should also result in players asking, why is this happening? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear we'll go again. We go again, we'll put it right. Not the result we want. I fucking hate that shit. I hate that, ad nauseum. Not the result we wanted. We need to take a look at ourselves. How long are you going to take a look at yourselves, lads? At some point, are you going to change or what? Because,
I want to see consequences, man. Like it's one thing that frustrates me is I really do want to see consequences.
but James, I do too. But what I'm trying to understand is why is it there are certain players that get to play consistently,
Mhm.
whose performances and levels are nowhere near
Yep.
the levels they need. But there are other players who are not getting a look in and who have been playing significantly better and who are held to a different standard. Why?
Yeah. I agree with that. It's one of my biggest complaints I've had all of the season. Like, I think that's, like, I'll give you an example, okay, of something and it's, I'll give you an example of one where I disagree on this front. Like, we got these public comments from Ruben about Ugarte's training recently.
Yeah.
I don't think Ugarte's been good, but I can't tell you that I agree for 1 second that I've ever seen him put in the effort levels I saw from a bunch of players last night. I cannot say that I've ever seen
Mm.
him look like that. Even if he's not been good, even whatever you want to call about it, I've never seen Ugarte play with that low level of intensity, intention, and desire that I saw from a lot of people. Why is he getting publicly called out? Even again, he's not been good. It's not my point. I'm saying, why is he getting, you know, uh, that being the judgment of him when I see so much worse from an
Yeah.
energy level very regularly from quite a few others?
Well,
Why? I don't
yeah.
agree with and I don't understand, regardless of whether he's been good or not. It's like that I don't get. I don't understand it. The standards for him seem to be higher than others. As well, Mainu doesn't play very often because I personally kind of agree with this. I don't see him having enough at the moment to justify it, but I'm seeing worse from others. So the standards don't seem fair in some respects for whatever
Well,
reason, and that I do have a big question on the manager for myself.
there was a very specific insult there to me, James, with him digging him out over training.
Yeah.
It seems to me that Amorim is not putting him in a team because he's not particularly happy with how Ugarte
Mm.
is training. Now that players can lose form, whatever, and managers can explain that away really easy. To dig out him for training purposes,
Yeah.
is this is Amorim trying to force Ugarte out before January? I mean, I don't know, but that's a very, very specific, causal
Yeah.
reason for him not playing. I'd look, anyone that's played football, there's good trainers and bad trainers. Eden Hazard was a
Yeah.
horrendous trainer, but brilliant on the pitch, right?
Yeah.
Paul McGrath didn't train because of a couple of days a week because of his knees. There's loads of players who are brutal in training but are exceptional on the pitch, and there are players that are amazing in training and are terrible on the pitch. Ultimately, to me, the barometer is how do you play on the weekend?
Yep.
Like I know Jack Stein had this saying once where, if you work hard Monday to Friday, you get to play football on your day off, right?
Yep.
It's because that's the privilege, that's the reward. So I understand training matters, but I look at that and I think to myself, are we, training matters, don't get me wrong, but the ultimate barometer is what you do on the pitch. Now, Carty hasn't been good enough on the pitch, but
Yep.
I don't know, James. I to take someone out specifically over training is. I thought Amarim would be smarter than that.
Yeah, I wasn't big on it, and I think that partially it came out because of a story that essentially was was put out about a comments he made privately at the end of last season, at the same time as those like Garnacho ones and whatnot. And so then he was asked about those things, and um, but I would agree, and I think that where I would agree with it is I would say, well, what about the consequences for playing like shit on the pitch every week? I
Yeah.
care a lot more about that as the paying customer, to put it sort of crudely when I'm watching, because I'll watch, in my view, many players put in lower effort, lower energy, and lower focus, and you're telling me that it's about training. Well, you don't win points in training. You don't entertain the fans in training. You don't, that I understand that managers have to make decisions, and a lot of them do based on training and things like that regularly. But there's got to be a weight scale of how much do you weight the performances on a match day versus training. Andres Pereira looked amazing in training for United for a long time. That's why he did so well in preseason. Every preseason, he was fantastic. And every time the season kicked off, he was one of the worst players on the pitch. You can't just keep weighing up training to these things. I bet Martial trained really, really well because he stayed at United a long, long time. But then every match day he'd get injured and this would happen, and his career faded off on this front. Uh, uh, there's players who train extremely well and play extremely well. The really, really, the greats, I'm sure, are great at both. But
Yes.
there's the weighting does feel off to me when it feels like players are getting away with it on the weekend.
What
And I
will
think that's happening a lot.
Ruben Amorim won't save his job by getting 22 athletes who train with, exceptional professionalism and precision. He will save his job by
Yeah.
11 players on the pitch getting results. That's his primary responsibility. He has to get results on the pitch. He needs
Yeah.
help, of course. I think that it would. I know United don't have games, James, but that squad needs improving in January. Like United
Yeah.
cannot let
It
that
has
window go
to.
by. There's talks, obviously, about João Gomez.
Yep.
Do you know anything about that, my friend?
Yeah. Well, the last thing that I'd heard was during the international break was certainly, I mean, João Gomez is somebody I do know for sure United have actually been scouting for quite a long time, even as far back as Brazil. And including considered making a move for him on a couple occasions in the Premier League. He's obviously there at Wolves. He signed a new deal around the same time as Cunha. It's quite possible there's some relegation clauses and things like that in there, as there were with Cunha as well. Wolves in a really bad situation at the moment. Players definitely interested in the move. I do believe United have had discussions with his representatives, not necessarily club yet. I think it's being played up maybe a little more than it is at the moment, in that there aren't these club to club talks over a deal. But at the same time, a lot of transfers happen with very little club to club discussions for the most part. A lot of it's done between the club and the agent and the representatives. So that's not particularly surprising. I think it's viewed as a potential opportunity in January for a Premier League player that can come in, has a lot of energy, very physical. He's young. He's got a good future, and someone that could make a difference. I'm not sure yet whether it'll happen, but I think it has to. I think it's the type of signing they really, they can't get their major guys. We know, like we've seen well reported, Anderson, Baleba, Wharton, these guys that are like big targets, not obtainable in January. It's not going to happen for anybody. This is to me, one of those players that's an opportunity. You don't always get these in January to look at and say, somebody from the Premier League doesn't need the adaptation period that could make a difference. That could really help in an area where United are really thin. It could mean the exit for somebody else, but I think it would be a big improvement for the team as a whole.
I put out a poll on my Twitter yesterday asking who would you prefer if there was a choice between Baleba and Elliot Anderson. I expected Anderson would win that, but not as emphatically. It seems like if you ask him, yeah, that's obviously it's not exactly representative of United's fan base. It's just a representative of a few people. But
Yeah.
I would, like both of them. I don't think both of them will happen, but Elliot Anderson has looked really, really impressive for Forest in this season. Where young Baleba has had the opposite trajectory. Now that could completely change over the next 6 months. But I don't know if Baleba's form this season causes United to reconsider. Uh, it
Yeah.
would certainly, I think, it would affect his price. But it was surprising how emphatically Elliot Anderson won that poll.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's played really well recently. So in that respect,
Um,
it's understandable.
yeah. So, all right, mate. So, quick look ahead to Palace, system v system, and then we split.
Yep.
What do you expect this weekend?
I think it'll be a tough game, but obviously I do expect United will react, show up a bit differently. Um, I am a little bit concerned about it, but I am a bit concerned about it. Away at Palace, it's a difficult one.
We get battered teams away at Palace, I would really worry for Emery because it would be very difficult to defend them after that. But
Yep.
hopefully, we see a United that responds and need to get the win. All right, mate, we'll leave it there. I know we have to run.
Sounds
Thanks to
good.
all of you for all your downloads, likes, retweets. Much appreciated. I hope you're all well physically, mentally. Much love to you, mate. All the best, TMG.
See ya.
Cheers, pal.